And first, has anybody been around the property or talked to the owners or any of that?
I drove by the property.
I drove by the property.
I drove by.
Okay. Stuart, would you like to present?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, City Planner with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. The application that we have before us at this moment is ZV12021-003. The location of the subject property is 2902 South Peninsula Drive. The owner applicants are John and Deanna Vitiolano. The property is about 111 by 141 feet, which gives us more or less 0.36 of an acre in terms of the size of the property. The zoning of the property is RSF-1, which is one of our urban single-family residential detached districts. The future land use is low-density residential, and the current land use is a single family, and it has a residential structure on it, which is about 2,800 square feet, more or less, according to the village property appraiser. So the reason why we're here today, board members, is because of the owner's proposal, which is to demolish the existing structure and rebuild a new single-family residential structure along with a pool. And it is being designed in such a way or laid out in such a way that is not consistent entirely with the city's land development code. And so there's 3 variance requests that are associated with this proposal. The first is to allow a 15-foot waterfront setback in lieu of the required 25-foot setback on the west side of the property. The second is to allow a 10-foot front yard setback in lieu of the required 30-foot setback on the east side of the property. And the third is to allow a 4.33-foot covered balcony patio encroachment into the 25-foot waterfront setback in lieu of the maximum allowed, which is 3.5 feet, permitted on the north side of the property. So I'll go through all of these individually, board members, just so there's no confusion. In terms of just the basics, the due public notice has been submitted to the city. And for the record, the variance application has been reviewed by the building official, the community service director, Mr. Fred Hyatt, and also by myself. So this is an aerial view of or location view of the property at 2902 South Peninsula. And to the bottom right, you can see that yellow circle. That's where we are today, here in the community center. And it's a less than 1 mile drive, whether you go on Atlantic Avenue or off South Peninsula to the upper left where you see the star, 2902 South Peninsula. This is a closer aerial view of the property, and this was taken in 2018 from the property appraiser's website. And as you can see, there's an existing single-family structure on the property. As you can see, the 2 waterfronts that I referred to earlier, and you probably hear me reference multiple times today. This is the Halifax River, of course. So you can see on the north side, you can see waterfront, and on the west side, you can see waterfront. And there is a private shared driveway off South Peninsula Drive. And I believe all 5 properties share this driveway. This is a street view of the property, the existing structure from South Peninsula Drive. Because it was a shared driveway and I didn't have consent, I obviously couldn't drive onto, well, I didn't ask for consent, I should say. I didn't drive onto the property to get a closer view, but this is basically what it looks like from South Peninsula Drive. So as I mentioned earlier, the zoning district classification for this property, as you can see down here to the middle in red, is, and it's not very clear on the monitor, it's a light yellow, and it corresponds with our RSF-1 urban single-family residential detached zoning district. And if you look in the RSF-1 urban single-family residential detached district land development code development standards, you'll see under dimensional requirements that the minimum front yard is 30 feet and waterfront setbacks or yards are 25 feet as well on the river. So if you're looking at a plan view of the property, board members, as I mentioned, to the north you have a Halifax waterfront, and to the west you have a Halifax waterfront. This is the only property in the city that actually has 2 waterfronts. Most riverside properties in Daytona Beach Shores only have 1 waterfront because of the nature of the contour of the riverbank. On this side of the peninsula, there's actually 2 waterfronts that are unique to this property. So when you apply the setbacks that I mentioned earlier in terms of waterfront setbacks, which is 25 feet on both sides, and then the 30 foot on the front side, and then I didn't mention the 10 foot on the sides, you end up with this red box here, which is basically the development envelope. So essentially, any development that happens in this property is supposed to occur within this development envelope, pursuant to the City's Land Development Code. So this is the site plan, the proposed site plan of the property. As you can see, this is the building core, more or less. This is the pool area on the west side of the property, and then this is the subject balcony that's referenced in the staff report and as part of the variance application. And I'll get into that a little bit later as well. So when you apply the site plan for the proposed site plan for the property and the development envelope, you essentially come up with a illustration such as this. So you can see on the west side of the property, the vast majority of the pool is outside the development envelope, or basically within the setback. You can see over here, this section of the building this is actually the garage and an upper living space, and then a portion is the balcony as well. And then over this little section, I'll talk about this little section a little bit later as well. This is a part of the balcony that is allowed to encroach into the setback, but I'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm just trying to give you an illustration, because I know sometimes a lot of the text material you see in my staff report might be a little bit confusing.
A little bit.
So again, in terms of the proposal and the reason why we're here today, if you look on the left right here, you'll see that the minimum allowed setbacks or required setback is 25 feet on the waterfront. So this pool right here is supposed to be 25 feet setback within this red line here. But what is being proposed is a 15-foot setback. So the variation that's being requested is essentially a 10-foot variation with a proposed 15-foot setback on the waterfront to the west. And this section that's highlighted over here is the section that I mentioned earlier that's encroaching into the 30-foot front yard setback on the east. So the setback is supposed to be 30 feet, but if you look on this plan and in your exhibits in your staff report, board members, you'll notice that the garage and the upper living space and a portion of the balcony is 10 feet from the setback, from the property line. So the variation there obviously is the difference, which is 20 feet. So staff did analysis of the city's land development code, and there wasn't any exemption for accessory uses and structures within waterfront properties on the riverside. We also looked at the exceptions that are called out in section 14-23 of the city's land development code, which is exceptions to required yard regulations. And the only thing that applies to this particular property in terms of exceptions are 14-43.3, which basically says chimneys, fireplaces, pilasters, roof overhangs, unenclosed balconies, et cetera, shall not project more than 3.5 feet, and under no circumstance shall the side yard setback be less than 5 feet. So basically what that is saying, board members, is that if you have an unenclosed balcony, patio, chimney, stairwell, things of that nature, those features of the building can actually go 3.5 feet into the required side yard setback, or into the required setback, but it can't go more than that unless the board approves it. But the maximum that, or the minimum that the board would allow to would allow to grant in terms of a variance cannot exceed 5 feet from the property line. So let's talk about the balcony real quick. So essentially, let me just get my mouse. We spoke about this section here that's in the front yard setback. So the section of the balcony that speaks to the aforementioned section of the code with regards to the 3.5 feet into the waterfront setback is this section right here. So this little section of the balcony is allowed to go 3.5 feet into the 25-foot setback. However, it's actually going or being proposed for a little bit over 4 feet, which the variation would be just under 10 inches or 0.83 of a foot. So in other words, the maximum encroachment of the balcony that's allowed is 21.5 feet, but what is being proposed is a setback of 20.67 feet. Does that make sense, board members? So I just included another section of the code with regards to nonconformance. The existing structure that's there right now, board members, is nonconforming, but that is going to be demoed, and there's going to be new construction. And as you know, in this section of the code, whenever a new building is being built, and other sections of the code, whenever a new building is being built, a new accessory structure, whatever is being built, that's new construction, all those new improvements have to meet the city's land development code. So in terms of the variance authorization criteria that's required to be considered by the board that's prescribed under section 1463.8 of the city's land development code. What I did was I created an analysis chart of sorts where I have the criteria. It's actually a summary of the criteria. Your staff report actually has the criteria spelled out for you in its entirety. And then I have 3 columns to the right, one for the waterfront pool, one for the front yard garage, and one for the balcony, and then I have comments here. So I'll just go over each of these real briefly. If you have any questions, please feel to go ahead and stop me and ask me. But the first criteria, which is one of the most important criteria, is that special conditions or unique circumstances exist to the property, that are unique to that property. And staff believes that because of the nature of the property, the physical nature of the property, in terms of having 2 waterfronts, which is really unique in this shore, as I mentioned, out of all the waterfront properties that we have, Riverside properties, this is the only property that has 2 waterfronts. So staff believes that the property is unique in that sense. However, we believe that the uniqueness of this feature only applies to the waterfront pool scenario. We don't think that the uniqueness of the property applies to the front yard setback or to the balcony patio requirements. In terms of the special condition or circumstance that I just mentioned with regards to the features of the property having 2 waterfronts, we believe that this is not, a self-imposed special condition. Obviously, that's the way the property was, over time occurred. It's a natural feature. So we believe that that criteria is met for the waterfront pool. However, for the other 2 variances, we don't believe that those would apply in this circumstance. The third criteria is that the interpretation or enforcement would deprive applicant of zoning entitlements. Again, because this is a unique feature in terms of having 2 waterfronts. Typically, as you know, board members, there would be a front yard setback, there would be 2 setbacks, and then you'd have the waterfront setback on the west side for riverfront properties. In this case, the property has 2 waterfronts, so instead of being able to go up to 10 feet, for example, on the north side yard, which would ordinarily be the case, they have to maintain a 25-foot setback. And because of that, we believe that the waterfront pool is in a unique situation in which if the city were to apply that code regarding the pool, that it wouldn't be able to enjoy the same entitlements that's allowed in other properties in the same zoning district. In other words, they can't go 10 feet to the property line. They have to maintain a 25-foot setback. However, again, we don't believe that those special conditions and uniqueness of the property apply to the front yard setback and to the balcony. Essentially, whenever there's new construction, the property owner has to try to meet the code to the best of their ability, with the exception of whether or not there's a special hardship, and then there's a variance associated with that, and the board grants that. So staff believes that the front yard portion, the portion of the structure that's within the front yard setback, could either be minimized, reduced, or altered, or reconfigured in such a way to meet the front yard setback, and the same with the balcony. In terms of the other criteria, the minimum variance needed, staff believes that if the board were to grant all 3 variances, that these would be the minimum variance needed, and that it would not authorize or extend nonconformities, and that it would be in harmony with the land development code and would not be injurious to the area and would not authorize unpermitted uses, and it is indeed consistent with the comprehensive plan. So after having said all that, typically what I do is I create a criteria summary table to just show the board staff's view of the application of the criteria regarding the application. And so in the case of the waterfront pool, we believe that all 7 criteria are met. In terms of the front yard setback, we believe that only 4 of the criteria are met. And in terms of the balcony patio, again, we believe that only 4 of those criteria have been met. And I typically note that, pursuant to prior and current legal counsel, a successful variance is supposed to meet all these criteria in order for the board to grant it. And this is staff's perspective. So with that said, staff is recommending approval of the waterfront yard pool setback variance, but we're not recommending approval of the 2. If there are any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those.
I have one, Stuart. Is there going to be an enclosure over the pool?
There was none on the plan, and I believe that the applicants would be able to answer that question.
Any other questions for Stuart?
The driveway, the access to that house, it's private?
Yes, it's a shared private driveway.
'Cause I drove down it thinking the big green sign at the front says South Peninsula Avenue. Okay, part of South Peninsula.
Yes, it's a shared private driveway. I believe there is an easement associated with that as well.
And there's 5 houses
Yeah.
for access on that driveway.
Yes. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is a subject property. And so if you're coming off South Atlantic Avenue, you take a westbound, and then you're able to access each of these houses in the area.
Now, that house over there that has the pool that is right next to it,
Oh, this one to the south?
the other one, that's right off the
behind
private
it.
shared driveway, the one right
Oh, this one right here?
to the east.
Yes, I see this right here. Yeah, so this is not a waterfront setback, and this is technically not a riverside or waterfront property. And so, under our code, because it's not a waterfront property, the pool can actually go, I believe it's up to, well, the deck can go up to 5 feet from the property line, from the rear property line. So again, this property is in a unique circumstance, and one is waterfront, and two, there's actually 2 waterfronts. So ordinarily, if this wasn't waterfront, the property owner would be able to build up to 10 feet from the property line here. But because it's a waterfront, he has to stay back 25. They have to stay back 25 feet.
So the new property doesn't have the same footprint of the old property?
No, the old development will have a different setback, footprint, exactly.
Right.
So one thing I didn't mention, board members, is that the existing property, if you look here to the east, I mean, it's almost on top of the property line. It's actually 4.5 feet, I believe I put that in my staff report, is 4.5 feet from the property line here. So whereas this is the front yard setback and it should be pushed back 30 feet, the existing structure is only 4.5 feet from the property line. The proposal shows that the new building will be 10 feet from the property line, and in fact, it's only this section right here where the garage and the living space above it will be 10 feet from the property line. So the core of the vast majority of the building core is going to be set back outside of the 30-foot front yard setback, if that makes any sense.
So what you're telling us, if the building was not demolished, it was remodeled, it would be grandfathered in for that?
Correct. Assuming that the remodeling and whatever work is being done is less than 50% of the fair market value of the structure.
Any further questions of staff?
I'd like to hear other people and what they want.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Is the applicant present? Would they like to make a presentation?
Good morning, Joey Posey, 420 South Nova, attorney for the applicant. And we also have the owners here too, so if there's any questions that, we're happy to work through everything here. And I really appreciate all the work Stuart's put into this, and he really has worked with these folks. And, most of what I agree with Stuart and where he's at, it's just there's a few things I think we were hitting on as we were kind of fleshing this out that it feels like these folks would be penalized for doing what's right in a way. They've been trying to work with the adjoining owners, and a lot of this footprint you see today was an evolution of how we got here. How do we make it better for everybody? And it's in not all regards is it perfect, but in many regards is it better than the existing footprint, which is what I imagine the code would be aimed for. That we're here to try to encourage folks to make a better home for the community and not try to penalize them because of the pre-existing conditions they may have found the footprint of the home they bought. So like Stuart mentioned, this is literally the only piece of property with 2 waterfront setbacks. So you shove in the footprint a little bit and you try to figure out, okay, well, how do we make this work? Well, some of the original footprint showed we had the building a little further to the north, trying to maybe utilize more of what the existing footprint looked like, but just working it out and working it through, we said, well, let's try to get this as close as we can to give these folks what they want, but at the same time not penalize them for doing what's right. And we pushed the footprint back, and in terms of the patio, This is about a foot and a half of additional patio that would cover the air handlers, which seems like a great idea to me, and I can understand maybe it doesn't check the literal boxes, but from a common sense perspective, I think this that makes sense if you're looking to try to how to encourage good policy through variances. The other part with the pool, again, it's one of those things where the code says what it says, and unless you don't want a pool on the beach side, that doesn't make much sense to me. And again, that one seems common sense too, where yes, the pool footprint makes sense given how we're trying to orient the house, and the last variance being the front yard, where I think we have to start from where we're at today, which is this home sits 4 feet from the property line. It's not as if we're sitting here on a blank slate necessarily and saying, oh, well, what house can we just put there? Because these folks came in with expectations, and I'm sure that every neighbor came in there with expectations too of what's already built. Which is, again, these folks have tried to communicate and be effective, but with communicating with those neighbors to say, does this affect you? And, we have letters of support and just trying to work through everything with these neighbors. And, I can't speak for everybody, but, the ones we've reached out and discussed this with, this makes some sense. So, and I think there is one of the neighbors here today, and, I can't speak for them, but that's the common sense approach, I think, of how we got to where we were, because if I'm at 4 and I'm going to 10, well, that seems to be a lot better, especially for the neighbor that's most impacted. That's really what I feel like the narrowing down on how we analyze this variance should be. It's a very unique piece of property, and these folks want to do a very nice house, and it doesn't make sense to try to encourage them to maybe not make it as nice as possible just because of how the code, its unintended consequences. So I'm here to answer any questions, or if there's any concerns. Again, we're happy to work through them, because these folks love it here, so they want to be good neighbors too. So that's really the presentation. So
What's the square footage of the old house, and what's the square footage of the new house?
I think it was 28,
2853.
2853 going to, I think it was, the plan showed just at 29, is that correct? So they're almost identical.
The total under roof square footage would be just a little over 8,000. That's with garage, bathrooms, everything.
The footprint itself.
Oh,
So,
the total lot area,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just under 4,000, 3,900.
I'm sorry, I misspoke then. Is that I apologize, I should have came armed with this information. So the new footprint would be 4,000, is that what I understood?
3936.
3936, so it is a larger home. But again, I understand what the point of the question is, and part of it too is, they want to build a nice home. So again, it's one of those things where the existing conditions trying to make do. But again, the question is well taken, because I understand what the point is.
I understand, but if it was scaled down, they would be within all of the parameters that are needed.
It could be. It could be. Yes. Yes, and
Got a question.
yes.
When did they buy the property?
Was it 5 years ago? Correct. 5 years ago.
Says the code has not changed in the 5 years, Stuart.
No, that's not.
And if you demolish it, you will have a blank slate, like you mentioned earlier.
Agree. But again, in response to that, though, it's one of those ones where it's trying to encourage good, what's best for the city, and how do we? Is it best to encourage these folks to try to work in the footprint, and at the same time try to make a beautiful home?
Is that going to be their permanent residence?
Correct. Yes.
On the existing property right now, the 4-foot variance is a garage, and it's going to be replaced with a 10-foot variance with another garage, is that correct? Is that the way I read it?
Yeah, the floor, the first floor is a garage. There will be living space above it, but for the most part, it's non-habitable.
You say non-habitable,
Well, it's a garage, but,
above the garage.
well, above the garage would be, yes, correct.
Habitable.
Correct.
Thank you.
Will there be a pool enclosure over the pool?
No.
I only asked that because last month we had that problem.
Oh, gotcha.
So wanted to make sure it was going to fit in the same footprint if it was good.
Well, yeah, and that's part of, I think that it's contemplating the variance. There's enough space there to try to take advantage of it without the enclosures, so.
Any further questions for the applicant? At this time? Okay, next would be calling for public input in favor of the application. And I do have 3 speakers. I'm not sure if they are in favor or not in favor, so I don't know which order they're going to come up in. We have Lisa, Greg, and Kimberly. Are we in favor or not in favor?
I'm not quite sure. I don't mind, he's my neighbor.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and have you come up then. Because the next item would be public opposed.
I own the 2 homes to the side, the one with the pool.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Lisa Spordone, 2900 South Peninsula Drive. So I own the 2 properties east of him, the one with the pool. And I don't have problem with building. What I'm concerned about is, I understand it's only 4 feet now towards my house, which would be closer with what they're asking, but they're also wanting to build 2 stories closer to me, rather than a single story. So right now, from my backyard, I have a view of the river, and I can't tell them not to build 2 stories up, but I'm concerned about the value and views of my property, because that's why I purchased that home. And I purchased it almost 7 years ago. And that's why I bought that home. I bought both those properties. And just concerned about the value or what. I came here not to go against them. I can't visualize it. I would like to see, instead of 1 story next door, it's going to be 2 stories on top of my property. So I'm concerned about the value or blocking my views. That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, thank you.
Do you live in either one of those homes?
Yes, I do.
Full-time?
Yeah, it's full-time.
Which one?
The main one. The other one's like an in-law suite.
Which would be the main one?
Next door to him. It's the one with the pool.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And then Greg and Kimberly, you wanted to speak? No? Okay. So is there any rebuttal from the applicant?
The only thing to note regarding the way the homes are built,
If you want to talk, unfortunately, we have to have you recorded.
so the only thing to note is regarding the way the
Can you
front.
also state your name and address?
Deanna Ritchie Vitellano. There is a view from that property that will remain, because if you remember, the house next to ours actually has a view north. So from the upstairs of their property, they will be able to look down the intercoastal to the north, just because of the way that street is designed. You can go back and look at that. So although it would obstruct, I think, a portion of it, it would not obstruct what I would consider the main view. The other thing too that I wanted to talk about was actually the balcony. The way that the balcony is designed is actually to cover what I consider is a pretty ugly part of the house. That's the air conditioner handlers. So the people that not only would be on her section, but also the people that are on the Halifax River in that little bay, they would see our house. And so the balcony is a very clever, beautiful way to cover up something that would be kind of an eyesore for them as well. So that kind of explains a little bit about the balcony.
I also have one clarification. I was just talking to the adjoining owner, and I think there was some confusion where one of the original plans they saw had the house shifted further north, and they actually didn't realize that we had fixed that. And that did address a lot of the visual impact. You know, again, we're happy to work with them, and again, they can. I don't want to speak for them, but part of the confusion was that we are trying to hold that 25-foot setback there with the actual building structure. So, you know, originally it did have a much greater encroachment to the north. So that was. That, again, I will let them speak for themselves, but that really was the concern, and we tried to address that. They're trying to be good neighbors, and that was the easy way to fix it for them, because, you know, part of it, we're trying to make this puzzle piece fit a little bit, and, you know, if there's something we can do to make it better for them, then that's great. So I just wanted to put that on the record and make sure that again, we're trying to work towards something here. So if there's any other feedback or we're happy to try to work this out with everybody and make this the best variance it can be, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal to that?
No, I think they should do it.
Well, no, the house is actually.
Yeah, no, I think.
Further on.
I agree with that, I just think, I think I needed to see it, but I approve, yeah, I mean, I want you guys to be happy. I mean,
I'm going to be happy too.
you know.
All right. Well, with that, we'll close the hearing. Is there any discussion among the board members?
Mr. Close, the approach on. Scaled down, it would solve all these issues. My opinion.
Yep. Further discussion? Can we have a motion?
Before you have a motion, I'd just like to remind the board that the planner has presented the criteria that need to be met. It has found that some of the criteria were not met. So if you have a motion in favor of granting the variance, I'd ask you to look at the criteria that need to be met and just put findings on the record of why you believe those criteria are met, as we discussed last meeting.
I have 1 second.
I don't know, John Kenny. We've closed the hearing.
Discretion of the board, or the board chair, excuse me.
I heard some feedback, and I just wanted to mention something very quickly. And I apologize too, but again, if it feels like the direction of this board is that there's a little work to be done still, I think the better course in this case would be to give these folks a little time to see what they can do, rather than maybe making the decision today if it feels like we're moving in a direction where we're just not there yet. So with that being said, you know, I didn't hear everybody's opinion. I just caught in passing a little that was going on here, but I wanted to put that out there because these folks, they're happy to work with you if we're trying to work towards something. So again, I'll take direction from you guys, but that's what I would say, and I'm sure that they would agree too, that if there was a little time given, that we could figure out something to try to make you guys happy too.
So we could have a motion on variance, we could have a motion to delay, we could, you guys have to help.
And you can make a motion if you pass the gavel over to me. If you want.
So if we are to rule, we need to rule individually, all three.
Yes, on each
So we would have
variance.
to say, this one, yes, this one, no, this one, yes, or whatever.
Same way it was presented to us, 3 different variances, yes or no.
We can approve one and delay two.
That I
I
don't
think if we're gonna do it, we should delay all 3.
There are 3 separate requests, so you could, for example, since the planner has already indicated that the criteria are met for the pool, if that's what you're getting at, you could approve the variance for the pool and then do a continuance for the other 2 if you wanted, or you could do a continuance for all 3 if you think that's necessary for the owners to revise their plans. And it's up to the board's discretion.
And if it means anything from the city attorney's recommendation, the first one would be advisable so these folks can get the plans more concrete, because some of this is kind of floating in the ether a little bit. So if we feel comfortable with the pool, then again, that makes sense to me, and then we can revise accordingly to try to make it fit, rather than leaving this all up to chance at the next hearing.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the city's recommendations, approving the pool variance and not approving the other two.
I second.
Can I clarify, when you say not approving the other two, are you granting a continuance, or are you intending to deny the request of variance for the other two?
Deny. Deny both the two that the city is not comfortable with and approving the pool.
We have a second?
I would second it.
I mean, I'm willing also to volunteer the continuance, if that,
Vote on the floor.
understood.
Mr. Lilly?
Yes.
Ms. Tornatori? Mr. Horian?
Yes,
Mr. Deloche?
No.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
So item on the agenda is to
Nominate the chair and the vice chair. Nominate the chair and the vice chair.
nominate the chair and the vice chair for the coming year.
Can you serve again?
Nominate Mr. Schmidt for chair.
Second.
Sherry?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now Vice Chair.
Nomination for vice chair for the year.
You guys want to be one? And you make a motion.
My motion goes in to the co-chair.
I didn't hear that. What did you,
I didn't hear.
what did you say?
We didn't
Rick
hear.
nominated Roseanne.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
I just have to speed.
Does any member have another comment for the board?
Happy birthday, Sherry.
Yeah.
And Roseanne? Okay, seeing no other action, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.